Hello everyone and welcome back to the RimWorld Mining Empire. My friends, it is my great honor today to bring you the final episode of the Mining Empire series. The Mining Empire series will end today in this episode, but will the actual mining empire fall? Well, that is a wonderful question, and it is up to you and me and my gravelly strep voice to find out. Let's begin. Yes, as you can probably hear in my voice, and I hope it's not that bad, I am sick once again. I feel like absolute shit, but I am still going to try to get this video out for you guys, so I hope the voice isn't too much of a distraction. I think I sound okay, per se. But to begin our episode, we have Lieutenant Vern and Scott going on an elk hunt to bring back some wonderful meat to the others. Now, the pair were not only discussing hunting elk during this hunting trip, though, they were also discussing how Captain Mitchell appears to have left in the dead of night to go back home as he had planned for more missions and things like that, of course. Scott was very excited to hear Lieutenant Vern speaking in such a manner because it would appear that the other soldiers were none the wiser as to what really occurred, which was exactly what he had hoped for, because if the other soldiers were to find out about Captain Mitchell's body deep in the mines before Bacchus and Tree could arrive for what they had planned, it could cause a few ripples throughout the entire mining empire and could cause some issues with the plan that he had developed. What exactly was Tree and Bacchus's plan? Well, unfortunately, Scott did not know. He only knew that they were going to set out on some type of rescue mission to liberate the slaves and try to take down the mining empire. They didn't necessarily trust Scott fully, as he had already switched sides once before. It was during this time as well, while waiting on Tree and Bacchus and everyone to arrive for the rescue mission, or the liberation mission, we should say, our slaves continued carrying out their mining duties, because just as Happy Oak told Lurkot in episode 1, the time for rebellion would come, but it is not now. Now, as our slaves are waiting for their liberation, Captain Hawthorne continued his devious research into weapons. His current research project would be into super heavy bombs. Super heavy bombs, of course, are much larger than the current bomb technology that we have, and just as we seen last episode, our current technology is extremely devastating. Now, bombs, of course, are extremely powerful, but what if enemies were to make it inside the base? That is a good question, and that is also why we are continuing to train up our small squad of Labrador Retrievers. I have named the two puppies, Cole and Boulder. Of course, just trying to stick with our theme of mineral names for animals and babies throughout the colony. Sometime later, late in the night, we ended up receiving a bulk goods trader from a nearby settlement, which was perfect as we were in the market for purchasing some more components, just as well as fuel for these bombs that Captain Hawthorne is researching. Because naturally, of course, the laws of nature and whatnot, the bigger the bomb, the more fuel it's going to take. And the bigger the bomb, the bigger the boom, which is very important for us. These prototype bombs that Captain Hawthorne is working on is actually a very ambitious project, because to the knowledge of Hawthorne and the others, bombs of this size, magnitude, and just power overall have never been utilized throughout this war. With enough bombs this size and power, this could turn the tide of the war. Now, of course, for such an important project, Hawthorne is tired of doing all his research in his bedroom, so he's actually commissioned a section of the mountain be dug out for his own personal laboratory, as well as 2 large bookshelves that will actually help him speed up the production of his research. And then, just like that, we now have heavy bombs. Of course, though, we are all about unlocking more and more secrets of technology, so Hawthorne is going to continue his research into even larger bombs while we work on the production of the super heavy bombs. With all the production taking place here at the Mining Empire now, Hawthorne has ordered Happy Oak to go out and build a new coal-fired generator, as we're going to need more and more power, as creating these massive bombs and other weapons, as well as really just keeping the lights on around the Mining Empire, takes a lot of electricity. During this time, I also saw Scott observing the memorial that Captain Hawthorne had made for he and Beryl when he thought that they had died in the helicopter attack. It's hard to say exactly how Scott felt as he observed the memorial. It's possible it made him feel more disdain towards the Marshal Service, or maybe even empathetic to them, as it shows that they actually cared enough to make this in his honor. But in the end, only Scott will know what this memorial means to him. In the meantime, though, we begin a strip mining operation just north of the mountain, as we are in need of more and more resources. However, during this mining operation, the slaves uncovered a structure within the mountain that was previously thought to be part of the actual mountain itself. They of course quickly notified the captain, and then he showed up to investigate the structure further. It was decided by the captain and the other soldiers that they should crack open this structure and see what is inside, because surely some ancient structure in the side of a mountain in this remote area couldn't be dangerous. Could it? Well, there was only one way to find out. Our soldiers gathered around and we began chucking grenades at the wall until it exploded. We realized this section of the structure was a very small walled-off room with a door, so we forced Happy Oak to begin trying to crack open the door. While this was going on, we also noticed a stone tablet on the wall. The tablet seemed to depict a Thrumbo and a strange insectoid creature possibly battling. It had many symbols as well above them. Regardless though, we decided to enter the structure, and what we found was disgusting. Several dried up puddles of green and red blood, as well as many corpses. Many of the corpses were those insectoid creatures, however the others were more humanoid. It would appear that these were Thrumboians who had rotted in here for so long that their horns had fallen off. There were also a couple of Thrumboian statues with armor that we had never seen depicted with Thrumboians before. This appears to have been an ancient throne room for an ancient Thrumboian civilization from long ago. It's hard to say exactly what occurred here in the throne room, but based on our observations, it would appear that the insectoid creatures overrun the Thrumboians and killed them. Just as we were looking through the dimly lit throne room, we heard an odd vibrating-like sound in the corner. It was so dark we could hardly see, but it appeared to be a green structure of sorts. Our dog Flint and Sandra decided to take a closer look at the structure. Then, like a flash of lightning, out jumped a massive insectoid creature to attack our soldiers. We began attempting to fire at it and run away to a safer area so we could try to get out of the structure. 3 of these massive beasts knocked down Konar, trapping her inside with them. Of course, we couldn't just allow her to stay in there and bleed to death. As they feasted upon her, someone would need to go in after her. It was decided that Lieutenant Verne was the fastest, so he quickly ran in, scooped up Konar, and ran outside, slamming the doors behind him, keeping them safe from the insects. He began rushing all the way back home with Konar in his arms. Her wounds were so bad we would need the best medicine that we have to treat them. Unfortunately, as our soldiers were so focused on saving Konar, Flint ended up stuck inside the ancient structure with the insectoids, where they would beat him down and he would eventually succumb to his wounds. It took a while, but eventually we did finally make it back to the base, where we rushed Konar into one of our medical bay beds, but unfortunately we were unable to stop the bleeding in time, and Captain Hawthorne and Lieutenant Verne looked on in horror as Konar passed away. Not only has the RimWorld Marshal Service lost one of the greatest soldiers that it has ever known, but Captain Hawthorne has lost his cherished wife, and Slate has lost her lovely mother. We built Konar a slate sarcophagus and placed it in the middle of a brand new crypt that we dug within the mountain, and then we buried her. Naturally, of course, Hawthorne decided to be the one who would give the eulogy at Konar's funeral. He began talking about what a brave soldier Konar was, but not only that, Konar was a nurturing and loving mother, as well as a wonderful, loving wife to him. Just as well, of course, she served the purpose of a non-biological aunt to young Severn. She has touched the lives of so many, all lost to some insectoid beast bastards. As our soldiers performed a 21-gun salute, Hawthorne reveled in his rage and guilt. All Hawthorne had left in this world was his sister Maya and young Slate. Things had happened so fast that Hawthorne hadn't really had a moment to sit down with anyone and talk. So Lieutenant Verne decided to sit him down in the dining room that night and just kind of discuss everything. Hawthorne was completely enraged, not only against the insectoids, but also for some reason delving into his madness more more and more, he blamed the rebels for Konar's death as well. Slowly but surely, Hawthorne inches closer and closer into madness every day. Of course, something productive did come out of this conversation, though. The two of them decided that they would gather up the mining slaves, and they would go deep into the mines to look for any more ancient structures or just insectoid hives. That way we can ensure everyone is safe from them. Because of course, if there's any more ancient structures within the mountain, surely it would be deep within the mountain, somewhere we hadn't looked so far before, possibly like the deepest parts of the mines and a little bit further beyond that. As Hawthorne and Vern were discussing their plans and ideas for this, young Slate went to visit her mother in the crypt. Unfortunately, though, visiting her mother's corpse would bring her no satisfaction, as her mother that she had loved so dearly was no longer here. There was nothing here but a body within a slate box. Slate didn't understand how this could have happened here, to them of all people. But as she was visiting her mother's grave, Hawthorne and Lieutenant Vern entered the slaves' quarters to gather up the mining slaves for a trip into the deep mines. To start with, the slaves assumed that it was possible Hawthorne and Vern knew about Captain Mitchell's body deep within the mines. However, they kind of realized that this wasn't exactly the case, as for one, they would be dead on the spot if they knew about that, and for two, they'd have no reason to bring them all the way in there if they're going to execute them. Nonetheless, though, they were steering right towards Captain Mitchell's body, and they had no way to throw Vern and Hawthorne off course so that they wouldn't find it, unfortunately, as any obstruction of the captain's orders could result in death. There was a better chance of them finding the body and fighting off Vern and the captain, or making an escape for it, than there would be to obstruct their orders. And unfortunately, this would end up being the case, as they made it to the farthest point in the mines, and it was quickly realized that there was a corpse among them. Hawthorne ordered Vern to move in and check the corpse. After realizing that it was Captain Mitchell, Lurkot quickly turned on Vern with his pickaxe. Happy Oak quickly turned on Captain Hawthorne to try and protect Lurkot, and unfortunately both of them ended up getting the absolute shit beat out of them as Frit ran away. Hawthorne and Vern carried the two slaves all the way back to the prison. As Happy Oak and Lurkot were resting in the prison cells, the captain and the lieutenant discussed their execution. Nobody told Oak and Lurkot that they were going to be executed. However, they basically already knew this. Given the severity of their actions, they knew that the only punishment that they would be inflicted with would be death. But before the execution of the two slaves, there was still the matter of dealing with poor Captain Mitchell's body. It was time for us to lay his remains to rest here in the crypt. Yes, it is true that this place was never truly Captain Mitchell's home, but it's better than leaving his body in the mines to rot. Now, I know what you're probably saying as well. Why is it that only Lurkot and Happy Oak are being executed? Well, the two of them actually took full credit for the death of Captain Mitchell. Just as well, of course, Frit ran away and did not engage the captain or lieutenant, so Happy Oak and Lurkot were to blame for that as well. The two of them were brought out into the dimly lit frozen helipad and prepped for their execution for their crimes against the Marshal Service. Happy Oak even requested to be executed first because he could not bear to witness Lurkot's death, to which Hawthorne happily obliged. But then a shot rang out from across the land. Hawthorne hit the helipad, and then Lurkot and Happy Oak began running away. The soldiers rushed to pick up Hawthorne and retreat back into the base. It was Oakley who had shot Captain Hawthorne in the shoulder, knocking him to the ground and saving Happy Oak. The rebellion has arrived. Happy Oak and Lurkot began making their way towards the caves. They were going to attempt to go through the caves and try to get out of this territory before the marshals pursued them. But lucky for them, on their way through the caves, they ran into a couple of rebel soldiers who explained that they were here to liberate them. But not only did they run into rebel soldiers, they also ran into Tree and Bacchus themselves. Oak was completely flabbergasted, as well as Bacchus and Tree were extremely excited to finally see Oak. Bacchus quickly embraced Happy Oak with open arms. Welcome home, old friend. As the sun began to dawn, the rebels were pelting the mining empire with their artillery guns, shell after shell. They managed to destroy the generators, completely severing the mining empire from electricity. Naturally, the Marshal soldiers came outside to return fire against the rebels, but unfortunately for them, this would not prove to be very prosperous, as even though they fired several artillery shells at the rebels, none of them managed to get close enough to do any damage. However, on the opposite hand, the rebel artillery shells managed to hit ammunition near the artillery guns of the Marshals, destroying several of them. The Marshals' artillery guns were destroyed, as was their power supply, and their runway was damaged, preventing their plane from taking off. It was during this epic battle between the Marshals and the rebels that Happy Oak and Lurkot removed their slave collars. After years of enslavement, they were finally free once more. Not only were they free, but they were free to choose, and they chose to stand beside the rebels. And it was during this time as well that Oakley, Bacchus, and Tree were all going over their battle plans. So far, everything was going according to plan, but now with the arrival of the rebel forces, it was finally time for Scott to uphold his end of the plans. He quickly entered the slave quarters, where he would rally all 3 of the remaining slaves against the Marshals. The 4 of them rushed through the hallways of the mining empire, where they would encounter Lieutenant Vern. They began beating the absolute daylights out of him. After taking Vern to the ground, Frit grabbed his rifle, pointed it at him, and then executed him right there in the hallway in front of everyone. As they all screamed down with the Marshals running through the hallways looking for Hawthorne and the others to kill, they encountered them at the end of the hall, and a shootout began between the soldiers and the rebels. Neither side, of course, giving a single inch to the other. The Marshal soldiers, of course, were too damn prideful to lose to slaves and rebels, and the slaves would not give up their freedom so easily. It was finally time for revolution and liberation. Upon stepping outside to look for an escape route, Hawthorne saw a massive group of rebels amassed by the flagpole, but not only that, they had his sister with them. They allowed Hawthorne and his sister Maya to approach one another so that Maya could explain what the rebels were offering to him. But of course, Maya quickly urged him to listen to the rebels' demands so that the 2 of them could still be together and neither of them would die. Shockingly, Tree offered to accept Hawthorne's surrender if he were to surrender himself, the other soldiers, as well as the remaining slaves, and come and do research for the rebels. With his sister's recommendation, Hawthorne actually accepted this gracious offer. Maya and Slate were the only family Hawthorne had left. If he were to die, Slate would be alone, as would Maya, or if he were to turn against the rebels' orders, it is very possible that they may all die. He and Maya looked all around the base for Scott and the slaves to explain to them that they were finally surrendering and they were going to be given their freedom. This was Hawthorne's last-ditch effort to try and preserve himself and his family, which is ever so ironic, and this was not lost on Scott and the slaves, as he had taken the lives and families from so many others. No. Scott and the others did not believe that Hawthorne deserved to be allowed to surrender, so they decided to take matters into their own hands. Frit quickly raised her rifle and shot Hawthorne to the ground. After Hawthorne hit the ground, Scott quickly raised his pistol and shot Hawthorne's sister in the head, killing her. With all the atrocities that Hawthorne has committed, he does not deserve a free pass in exchange for some research. As the others left and Hawthorne lay there on the ground next to his dead sister in a puddle of his own blood, Beyonder creeped up on him. Hawthorne begged Beyonder for mercy, but Beyonder said there was no mercy for no pricks, as he threw a Molotov cocktail at the massive bombs that Hawthorne had created. And now we would truly see the power of these super heavy bombs that Hawthorne had researched. After the massive, catastrophic explosion, the rebel soldiers would begin infiltrating the mining empire, and the remaining Marshal soldiers like Sev, Sandra, and Norman would all be arrested and taken into custody by the rebels. Since Scott lied and said that Hawthorne had turned on them within the mining empire base, a fair trial was now no longer on the table for any of the Marshal soldiers. Since Scott, of course, did hold up his end of the bargain though, Tree, Bacchus, and Shortus granted him a pardon. He would now be free to continue his life. However, he was no longer allowed to serve in the rebel forces. Even though he had somewhat redeemed himself, there's no room for traitors among our ranks. Tree, of course, said that it was a complete shame that Hawthorne had betrayed them like this, as his research into weapons and whatnot would have proved crucial for defeating the Marshal service. But of course, we will continue winning this war one Marshal base at a time. After their incredible victory here today, with the fall of the mining empire, everyone was so eager to get back home. Yes, of course, in terms of the war and liberating the planet, there was still so much to do, but the tyrant known as Hawthorne had finally been toppled. And that, my friends, was worth celebrating. But guys, I want to thank you all ever so much for watching the episode as well as just the entire series and staying with me in our Rat Knight RimWorld universe. This is so much fun, and we have plenty more to come. I hope you continue watching and sharing this story with me, this shared universe and just our adventures, you know. But I love you guys ever so much. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next series. Goodbye.